Burmese pythons on the table. And all intents and purposes, they're all full of eggs. And we have size ranges here from 17 feet, 15 feet, 14, and 13 class snakes. But we're not really reporting on the large size of these animals. It's the fact that they're laying so many eggs and they're having such an impact on the system. So that chart back there, that's a hypothetical what it could take for one of these size class animals to reach 15 feet, 17 feet. And so multiply that amount of native wildlife by how many of these pythons may be out there, and you're getting a sense of what's happening to the Everglades right now. This speaks for itself. You really don't have to narrate this. I mean, the question is, what do you think it took for these animals to reach this size? And I doubt it was just rabbits and possums, raccoons. It's all the above. And when they reach a certain size, they're likely taking down deer as well. In fact, I would bet on it. I would bet that this animal here has taken down some big game. But our focus on this research project that's been ongoing for 4 years now is to learn these animals' behavior and then maybe use it against them. And the project has evolved into a removal campaign of sorts, and we are tagging male pythons, and we're letting them back in the system, and they lead us very effectively to these female pythons. 70% of the female snakes we caught this season were using tagged male pythons. A few were from active searching or hunting, like these larger females, but the majority of these breeding females came in with some hard work tracking males. So we basically have turned them against themselves. But it's all about the impact that these animals are having across the greater Everglades system. Any one of these animals could have eaten that assortment of native wildlife. So you're looking at the true scale of the problem here. All of these snakes have come from a localized area in Collier County. And these are a quarter of the females that came in this season. So we had about 27, 28 females. You're looking at 7 of them, the larger size class. All intents and purposes, all of these are gravid and filled with eggs. The snake team is going to do a necropsy here in a few minutes. We're going to take the 17-foot female python and do an egg count of the developing eggs. Just see how many are in there. I have a guess. And we're trying to arrest the development of these egg clutches before the female will, all of these females would have laid a clutch of eggs, likely next month, and then they would have sat on those eggs for 2 months and incubated them. And if those eggs were fertilized, which they probably all will be, all those little baby pythons would hatch, and they'd be out in the ecosystem. So over four breeding seasons, once we really got started tracking these animals, the egg count started to add up. And we've removed over 3,000 developing Burmese python eggs from a pretty small area of Collier County over the last 4 breeding seasons. So we really don't know how many of these animals are out there. We're not waiting to really figure that out. We're actively collecting that information that might help us with that number that we need to know, but we're not wasting any time removing these animals from the ecosystem. But the Sure. Right. So we're really effectively trying to disrupt the breeding system, the breeding cycle of these Burmese pythons. We're targeting the females before they lay their eggs. Once this animal chooses a nest location, they are often so cryptic that you'll never know they're there. They usually choose a burrow underground in southwest Florida or a patch of grass where they're hidden, and they are as cryptic as a creature gets. Even with the radio tag implanted in these animals and tracking them, 9 out of 10 times you'll never know they're there. They are just so cryptic, and we really have to use their behavior against them. And a very effective technique that we've combined over the breeding seasons are actively hunting for pythons early in the breeding season. We'll take candidate male pythons, outfit them with radio transmitters through our veterinary partners, and then send them back out, and they are the best way of finding a female Burmese python. A male Burmese python seems to be the best python detector on the planet so far. So this technique that we're utilizing, it isn't the answer, but it is working until we find a smart weapon to deploy. Somebody in a lab somewhere is working on pheromones. Somebody needs to be really working on developing smart trap technology that we can deploy. Right now, all that we have is hard work, hunting, searching for these animals, and then tracking them, using them against themselves. And you're looking at some of the larger females that have come in this breeding season. These are all females on the table. They are all gravid, full of eggs, it seems. And we're going to do a necropsy here in a minute of this large female. We'll measure her, and the snake team will do an incision, and we'll count the eggs. And we'll just see how many eggs would have been deposited by this specific female. And we like to get them before they drop the eggs and remove them from the system. So it's all about the impact these animals are having across the Greater Everglades. I know it's a large scale here. This is one of the largest snakes on the planet. They don't seem interested in us. We have walked in on thousands of observations on these Burmese pythons. They always want to get away, unless we're removing them from an egg clutch. Then they're very defensive, and rightly so. They don't seem interested in us, but this is a new apex predator here, and as they expand their populations and our homes push out into those boundaries, there could be some negative interactions in the future. So our focus is on targeting the breeding females, removing them from the system while new techniques get developed. We really need to get on this problem. These animals are expanding their range, they're gaining ground, and they are severely impacting our native wildlife. The question I would pose to you is, looking at these animals, what do you think they've been eating? What do you think they haven't been eating out there? To attain this size, this is a 152-pound female Burmese python. To attain this size, it's jaw-dropping what this animal would have consumed during its lifetime. Because we're going to pull this snake off the table. This is a... Sure, yeah. In fact, I want to get a photo of this on the table before we remove this. No worries. All right, snake team right there, real quick, because this is. Awesome. Yeah, take this all in, because you're not going to see this many female pythons from Collier in one spot for a while. We're going to start doing a necropsy on all these animals, get the full official egg count from this season. The other thing that's important that will spare you those gory details is we're interested in the gut contents. So in a full necropsy, after counting the eggs and looking at the reproduction, we will take a sample of what's left in the intestines and the guts, and that'll get sent off to the University of Florida. And just from a hair or some feathers, we'll add to the species list of animals that they're eating. All right, you guys ready? So we're going to take this snake. Everybody's going to grab a piece of it. Okay, there we go. They are beautiful animals. I mean, they truly are. Might take me time to convince some of you of that. But. All right, let's pull her all the way to the wall. Okay, so we're going to get a tape. Do you want to hold that? Put it behind you. Okay. Got her? Okay, cool. I'll pull it tight. Yep, pull that tight that way. All right, so if you want to come and see this, this is a 17-foot python. That's a tape. Actually, it's 17.1. And this is the longest snake that's come in on the study in 4 years. And to my knowledge, this is the longest documented Burmese python this side of State Road 29 in Collier. So she's a monster. and a very impressive python by any stretch. Okay, so this great camera angle here. I mean, get her in her full glory. We're going to flip her over, flip her over, and then we're going to start the, all right, we got that. So do you want to write the length? All right, so Jamie and Ian are going to start the necropsy. Yeah, you ready, Jamie? Roll her over after you. Okay. This is going to take a little time, guys, so hang in there. Bear with us, but we don't want to rush this. I want to do it right. So we're assuming a pretty good clutch of eggs right here. And while we're waiting, if you do have any questions, well, stop talking. Feel free to ask, but it's a good angle there. They're cutting. Feel free to get in there for some angles. It's the longest we've got on the study. It's a 17-foot, 1-inch female python, and she weighs 152 pounds. It's not the largest snake we've pulled on the project. The biggest snake by mass was a 16-foot, 185-pound python. You had to see this thing to believe it. It was massive. It was full of eggs. Actually, these are eggs under the TV over there. Get a shot of later. Those are filled with foam. Those eggs had hatched, or we caught them before they hatched. Go ahead, Jamie. Jump in when he's... Sure. Jump up there, Jamie, and help pull it apart. So Jamie's a conservation associate here at the Conservancy, and Ian is a wildlife biologist, and they're part of the snake team. And so they're performing a necropsy on this 17-foot, 1-inch female Burmese python. We are going to get an egg count, a developing egg count, and then later they'll also take some samples from the stomach, and we can determine what this animal may have been eating, although it looks like a little bit of everything over the course of her life. A pretty impressive creature. We've developed a healthy dose of respect for these animals out there. And keep in mind, they're not here from any fault of their own. They were released or escaped from the pet trade, and they found South Florida to their liking. And the ecosystem is not ready for a new giant snake in the system. The animals don't seem to have a defense against this, and we're witnessing the native wildlife, the greater Everglades, being turned into giant snake, real time. And so that's what you're seeing here today, this true scale of the problem. This is very much not a trophy shot. This is an impact statement. We're putting all these animals out there just so you can see them all in one place. These are all females. They're all full of eggs, and these are a quarter of the females we brought in this breeding season alone. So they're just set, all from Collier, not terribly far from here. Don't be afraid. They're not interested in us. They're interested in our native wildlife for sure. You can only imagine what it took in pounds of native wildlife and types of species to make snakes of this size. It's a 17-foot python. There's two 15-foot pythons on the table, some 14-foot pythons and 13-foot class snakes. So they're making an incision along the belly. You can get in there with the camera. There are some things you can't unsee, so be careful. But this is what we're dealing with, so we need to see it. So they're making an incision, then they're going to get through the fat layers. Going to get them some paper towels for when it gets a little juicy. I'll put some paper towels here. I'm going to get another roll. Perfect. Take your time. Should I get a tray, or are you just going to kind of expose it? Okay. Yeah. Are they white?
They moved down, so they probably, maybe they're not white
But there's still a bunch of them in there, right? Here they are. So what you're seeing here, don't get confused, and it's going to make a little more sense. There's fat bodies here. So this is the fat of the land. This is what they've assimilated from the native wildlife. And then underneath this will be the eggs that he's going to expose here in a minute. And we'll get a count. This animal might have a pretty high, I would imagine, pretty high egg count. Maybe more than we've seen to date. And this is just one female of many. We really don't have a handle on how many of them are out there. Okay, still. They're on their way. Wow, there's a lot of them. It goes all the way down here. Okay, take your time. There's a lot of them. Come on, come closer. Come on. They won't bite.
There's a whole unseat eggs. These are eggs here. See?
Yes, these are fat bodies. These would have all been future pythons this season. Look at them all. It's just this is an egg-laying machine. Yikes! This may be the most we've seen. We'll see. All right, so yeah, we'll try to keep you guys from the Gallagher zone here.
All right, you want to start counting then. So.
Okay. Yep. What side is that? The left over here? Okay. I'm gonna be quiet while I count.
Okay, so there's 49 on the right side.
Wow. Okay. So one more side to go.
Yeah.
This may be a record-breaking egg-laden snake here for Collier for sure. So this is going to air at dinner time, huh? Wow. $43. Average clutch size we found for Collier is 43.
46.
So
Over 90.
over 90? I think that may,
95?
well, I think 93 or 97, I'm not sure, may be the record on the East Coast. That's not the point of this exercise here. So this is by far the largest developing egg mass here in Collier. What is that?
So
These would have been two more?
Yeah.
They just didn't drop in?
Yeah, it looks like they're, yeah, I don't know if I can.
Would they have? Yeah, we won't count those. Wow.
But like that, so okay, so yeah, so these ones, maybe these would have been pushed out.
So do a double count. We'll do a double count again before we put this animal, just to make sure. Fold these eggs back in here for a nice photo moment. And then, yeah. So what's the official number? 95 eggs. By far, this is the largest massive eggs we've seen in Collier from a 17-foot female python. And so Ian's holding up, that's fat. That's a fat layer right there. Those aren't little eggs in here. These are the eggs developing. And these animals are remarkable when they get a prey item, how they can turn that into reserves. And this female was clearly eating very well in the off season to be able to put this much energy to her eggs and still have these fat reserves. So if this animal was not captured last week, in the next couple weeks she would have deposited all these eggs, and she would have made a clutch in sort of a round mass, and she would have coiled herself on top of those and incubated those for 2 months. And give or take a week or so, around 4th of July, we tend to see the little baby pythons hatching out in Collier County, and then they are unleashed into the ecosystem. They do have predators. Alligators get after them quite well. We do know that indigo snakes eat baby pythons. And then there's a host of other predators that we haven't officially documented yet. But much like a baby alligator hatchling, before these animals reach apex predator size and status, they're vulnerable to other predators in the system, and then they turn the tide back against them. So you've heard of some of the mammal decline theories on the eastern Everglades, and some people are pointing the smoking gun at the Burmese python. The animals over here, we still find prey remains of raccoon, possum, rabbits, foxes, wading birds, deer. I've seen alligator inside photos of pythons on here. On the East Coast, some of their pythons that they're necropsying and looking in the stomach contents, there isn't much diversity of native wildlife showing up because they've probably eaten all of that wildlife so far. And if you had told some of us biologists here that we would be tracking giant snakes 10 years ago, we would have thought you were crazy. And here they are. So there's a lesson here. This one is out of the bag. This Burmese python is very much out of the bag. In it, there's a learning lesson here. What's next on the scene? Are they Argentine black and white tegus? Are they Nile monitors? Is it something yet? How many? 95?
Yeah, it's 95.
Wow. And 2 are still not dropped into the...
I don't know if the state of these ones, but I'm not going to...
Don't open that? Okay. So 95 developing eggs in a 17-foot, 1-inch female Burmese python from Collier County. And all of these on the table are female Burmese pythons that would have a sizable egg count. I doubt 95. So on this table, we had 740 pounds of python sitting here, over 100 foot of snake. And over the next couple days, we'll finish the necropsies and get an egg tally this season. But this is arrested development. We're catching them before they lay on their eggs, and these animals have a chance to hatch and go out in the ecosystem. And during 4 breeding seasons on this research project, once we really started to learn this animal's behavior, we got very effective at removing them. Early in the breeding season, starting in November, we'll actively search or hunt for these animals. We don't use any weapons. We just use our hands. A lot of it is from a vehicle. Some of it's from foot surveys. And then candidate animals, males of a certain size, we found we can employ them, turn them back into the system, and they only have one thing on their mind for those months. They are looking for females like this. And they are a heat-seeking missile, so to speak, to female Burmese pythons. So combining hunting and tracking, we've removed over 6,500 pounds of Burmese python and removed over 3,000 developing eggs from a pretty small area of Collier County. Most of our study area is along the Tamiami Trail, so way out rural eastern Collier. But we keep tabs on where these animals are showing up and where they're moving, and each season they're gaining ground. There's an app for the phone that you can download, the I've Got One app, and that's very important because we do need an army of observers out there that are looking for these animals, that know how to identify a Burmese python. Clearly, if it's this size and it doesn't have a rattle on its tail, it's a Burmese python. The eastern diamondback rattlesnake can get to be large size, but you won't mistake that for a Burmese python. When these animals are small, you're highly unlikely to ever see one. And a lot of people mistake our native red rat snakes for small Burmese pythons. Don't kill on first sight. Take a photo. You note your location. You can get that I've Got One app, or if you do see a large and you're sure a Burmese python, you can call the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission hotline, 1-888-I've-GOT-ONE. And what we really need are an army of observers out there, people with their smartphones that can take a photo and get a location, and that gets uploaded on the web, or they call Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and they can dispatch a responder to the area. Don't try to tangle with one of these animals if you don't have a little bit of familiarity with them. They are pretty easy to wrangle once you do get a little bit of skills if you're so inclined. All of these animals were hand captured. All of them were humanely euthanized. We have a lot of respect for these animals. They're beautiful creatures. They're not here for any fault to their own, so we put them down as gently as we can.
Is there any other questions? Well, we'd like to do one Not one-on-one, but yeah.
Sure. That is a very good question. I don't have that answer, sir. How many don't get captured? You just don't know the density of these animals. They're so cryptic, it's really hard to get at that number. But we do need that number because what we're working towards is a management strategy. We're not going to eradicate this animal. It seems unlikely. So we have to knock back their numbers. But I don't know how you do an effective survey for the density of these animals, but we do need that number so we know if our efforts are actually making an impact out there. Because we can get excited about removing these all day long, but if there's hundreds of thousands out there, that's why we need to follow the science. And the research is important because we can just be guessing, but over the years of following these animals around, we're developing a picture of this localized population here. We know our neighborhood, so to speak, regarding these animals. And there may not be as many large breeding class females out there than we think of in a portion of Collier County. So if we can target these big egg-laying females, of course there's other ones ready to come in and fill that role later. But if we sit on the sidelines and do nothing, I can guess what's going to happen. These animals are going to be showing up in places we don't want them. And it's going to continue to be more problematic. Got it? There would be a size they get. The smallest female we've seen was just under 8 feet. I don't know the age of that animal, maybe 2 or 3 years, and they're probably in breeding age. That's why we need to follow some of these animals a little longer terms. So we do need to follow the science. That's going to lead us to a better management strategy. A lot of efforts have just been throw some money at it here, watch what happens, throw some money there. The removal campaign in Collier has been sustained pressure with our partners. We work with Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, Collier Seminole State Park. We have funding from Naples Zoo, our partner across the way here, and private donors to keep this moving forward. So this is sustained pressure in a localized area over 4 breeding seasons in Collier County to remove over 3 tons of python, over 3,000 eggs, to be continued. And everyone, just so you know, this is the snake team. This is Ian Easterling and Jamie Kittle. She's a conservation associate. He's another biologist here in the department. And the majority of the snake, all the snake that came out of the season was drug out by this team. Jamie mostly spots them, and Ian drags them out. If they're a mile out in the mangroves, they get put in a big backpack, and he mans them out and on to the next one. So they are heavy. I'll stand here with this backdrop here if you don't mind. They can. No. Here's fine. And you're welcome to ask them questions as well. Okay, so they can do interviews. If Catherine, no? Catherine, it's okay to ask them questions too, or it doesn't matter? Okay. Yeah. Dude. Let's keep the blood to a minimum. So it looks good. Cool. Yep. Yeah, I know. It's a tough environment here.
If you're going to talk, they should probably be standing by you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let's bring the snake team over here.
All right. Sure. Why not?
Everybody, grab a snake. So if they ask you a specific question, we only have 10 microphones here, so it should pick up.
Yeah.
So this is the Conservancy's snake team that's studying invasive Burmese pythons. And on the table here are 6 of the large females that came in, and behind us is what's left of a necropsy of a 17-foot Burmese python.
So we'll ask just all of your names.
Sure.
If you don't mind, first and last name, spelling, and title.
Hi, I'm Jamie Kittle. I'm a conservation associate here.
Of your last name.
Kittle, Kittle.
And it's
You have an unusual, it's Jamie.
Jamie. There's 2 eyes.
Sorry, Jaimia.
2 eyes in Jamie. And Ian Bartosek, IAN, last name Bartosek, Bartos. ZEK. I'm a wildlife biologist and science coordinator here at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida.
Ian Easterling, IAN, EASTERLING, and I'm a field technician, wildlife biologist here.
Fire away, guys.
Okay, so because the way it's set up, we can only hear you.
Yep.
So if we need to ask questions, we'll have to move all the mics. So I guess
Okay.
focus on you and then we can
Sure.
use the mics if needed. I guess you kind of talked about it briefly, but now that we have everyone here, just talk about why these Burmese pythons are so, dangerous, detrimental to what we've got in Everglades.
Sure. These animals are having a tremendous impact on our native wildlife. And so the question I would pose is, what do you think these animals have been eating to attain this size? And the stomach content analysis, it's a little bit of everything here. It's primarily mammals and birds. So we've seen everything from small pythons eating wading birds and rodents to actually pythons smaller than this size class eating deer. So that has think about it. I mean, deer are panther food, and then there's a cascading effect of all these other animals. So the native fauna of the greater Everglades ecosystem is changing with the addition of this new invasive apex predator, and they are not programmed to deal with a cryptic ambush predator in the system. So we're watching it change real time.
How'd they get here?
Sure. These animals got here through the pet trade, whether they were intentionally released or escaped. They are escape artists, and they can reach some considerable sizes in the first year. So a pet owner would get a Burmese python. They were popular in the 90s. And then if they fed it enough, it could get to be 8 feet in a year. And so if you're not a good reptile keeper, then you have some issues there. So, and something to consider is that the story is developing on how these animals got to Collier County. And there is a working hypothesis now through the research that we found here that there may be a separate introduction of Burmese pythons in Collier County. They may, a separate population may have originated. We're going to connect some lines of evidence on that. That's not the true story here. So there may have been multiple places of introduction, but they're here. They are expanding through the greater Everglades ecosystem. I believe the range of the wild Burmese python population is north of Lake Okeechobee now, to my knowledge.
You count how many eggs in the big mouth over there?
The 17-foot, 1-inch female back here had 95 developing eggs.
Any idea how many of those might survive to adulthood?
That's a very good question. That's why we still need to follow that research thread. We have some preliminary data on that from following hatchling pythons around. That story will develop in the future. I think for an animal that lays so many eggs, and that survival strategy is throw so many eggs out there, that the amount of those animals that would get to this large size breeding male or female are fewer than we think. But I guess it's a math formula how many of these animals are out there laying those clutches of eggs, and more on that later.
Why is it so important for you guys to be out there and working with the animals and getting them out?
Sure. Well, we work at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, and we have a wildlife hospital that treats native animals. So thousands of native animals are rehabilitated here. If we're spending that time and energy to rehabilitate those animals, put them back out in the ecosystem to come face to face with an invasive reptile predator, then that's going against our grain. So that's our focus, land, water, wildlife at the Conservancy. So this is clearly wildlife focus, new invasive animal out there. And then there's a social dynamic as well. As developments push further out into the edge of conservation lands, I think everyone's of the mindset that people don't want interactions with big snakes. They don't want to see these animals crossing through the developments or whatnot, or hunting nearby. They don't seem to be interested in us. And as I mentioned before, we have tracked many pythons with radio tags, and every time we've walked in on those animals, they have not been interested in us. They want to hide, they want to get away, but still, you're looking at a big invasive apex predator that's now in the system.
Talk about the tagging. You said you're kind of using their own to get them. Talk about that.
Sure. We have a cast of characters out there now, primarily male Burmese pythons, and we radio tag good candidate animals, certain size, a general location where we found that animal, or an animal that was found with a female, to me, has the right stuff already. And we're effectively redeploying that animal during the breeding season. And these animals are intelligent, but they usually are about feeding or breeding. So in the breeding season, that male has one thing on his mind, and he's looking for females. So we're trying to refine a technique that combines hunting without weapons, just active searching for these animals, radio tagging specific animals, sending them back, having them work for us. So every snake, these 5 animals were found through tagging. This one was found through searching, through hunting. They were all live captured, and they were all humanely put down. So 70% of the females we found this season were through radio tagging and tracking the animals. If we just relied on hunting, we're missing a lot of animals. Because when you do hunt for pythons, you've got to search for them in an area that's good for them and a good area for you to find them as well. It's what are they doing off of those roads? What are they doing off of those levees? That's where the males take us. And we've gone into some pretty crazy spots in Collier. There aren't few places we don't go. This, which one was Kirkland's girl? This one or this one? This one here was a marsh battle. This one was out in knee-deep water on the edge of a leather fern outcropping and cattails, and it took all 3 of us to grab this female before she escaped in the water, and then he had the fun job of putting it on his back and packing it out. This one that's dark in coloration was found by tracking a small male python, the smallest male we have in our crew right now. And she is dark because she was out basking and hasn't got rid of her shed yet, so she's sloughing off that skin. So just to put it in perspective, following 1 male python this season led to 3 separate breeding females scattered, a quarter mile, half mile apart. And following 1 male python in another zone around, we gave his score count 12, 13 snakes that he led us to. Males and females. He brought us into a zone. That's where the hunting then comes in as well, because you can track the animal. If they're not directly touching one of these animals, you know that if you're following a male in the breeding season, somewhere out there is a female, whether they're together or she's hiding, and that's where that search image and that skill set comes in to find these animals. So you put those 2 together, and I want to make it clear, that seems to be an effective technique for helping get after our local population, but by no means is this the end-all be-all solution to Burmese python management in the state of Florida. We need to put some money to this project. It's happening. The legislature is appropriating some funds, but we need some people thinking this problem out. We got to work smarter, not harder on this. So somebody's got to crack the pheromone code, the chemical cues that these animals use to attract each other. Somebody needs to make us a smart trap that can deploy. And then by cracking the code on this animal, understanding their behavior, we have home range estimates on the males that we use now. We know where the females like to use their eggs. We can deploy that. We're looking for some smart weapon technology, and we need some people to help us out.
And one more question.
Sure.
If you guys weren't doing this, what would happen?
Oh, well, you're looking at the scale of the problem right now, and this is a growth industry. These animals are gaining ground. Sounds amusing, but it's not. They are gaining ground, and they're showing up in places we don't want them. They're staking out along the edges of bird rookeries in the conservation lands. And so this is one focused effort from Collier County to get after these and work with our partners for a management strategy. You're looking at the snake team here, but we work with Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, partners at Collier Seminole State Park. We've had funding from the U.S. Geological Survey, and we have funding from our partners at Naples Zoo and private donors here through the Conservancy. It takes a lot of time to get after these, but there is no magic bullet for the python. You got to roll up your sleeves, and you got to get after it. And that's what we've been doing for a few years here at the Conservancy.
What's the biggest problem that you guys are dealing with right now in the Everglades?
Oh, there's many problems, so take your pick. But from a true wildlife standpoint, whether it's lionfish off the coast or invasive apple snails or Brazilian pepper. I mean, the Burmese python is the poster child for invasive animals and the ecological disruption they're having in the system. But as I mentioned earlier, public enemy number 1 here, we have Argentine black and white tegus that have a nice population in Miami-Dade. Hillsborough County have a few sightings of those in Collier. They're egg eaters. They're big-bodied lizard, a non-iguana. And they can even eat alligator eggs, bird eggs. So take your pick. There's a lesson to be learned here with this snake that's out of the bag.
Anything else important you hope to learn from a necropsy besides the egg
opossums, maybe foxes, bobcats, who knows, there's a whole list of animals, but if we can study kind of what they're eating and learn more about that, that's one of the more important things. And then anything else interesting, like mystery injuries or anything like that, the animal's health, the animal's general health. So
This is Snake Central here. All the data gets recorded. It gets into a sizable database, and tracking this problem over time, it's leading us in a certain direction. We're following the science to get after this problem. We're doing the best we can. A lot more to do, and we need a lot more people getting involved. As I mentioned before, what you can do is if you have a smartphone, there's an app, the I've Got One app. You can download it. You get familiar with your native wildlife and your invasives. You take a photo, and you can report that, and the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission monitors that, and they can dispatch people if there's a problem. And if you're walking along and you see a giant non-native snake, you can call the invasive animal hotline that the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission staffs, and that's 888 I've Got One. We need an army of observers out there calling out these sightings so managers and researchers can stay on top of this problem. Everybody good? Awesome. Appreciate it. Good luck.